Yeah, thank you, Yair, for talking about this most important time. I want to stress the time because the reading in Jeremiah, the last verse in Jeremiah 49, says it shall come to pass in the latter days. So meaning all of us here at this meeting, not just this meeting, but all those who will be um, considering the current times, the hardships of the current times, the chaos, the wars, the murders, the atrocities. The whole world will be considering that. And we need to consider that as well and tell the world what time it is. The time is in the latter days. The latter days, I want to talk about the latter days and the 10 tribes, the setting of the 10 tribes message in the latter days. It's most important. Timing is most important because we find the reference to that first in the Torah itself. In our times, we hear more and more about the subject of the lost 10 tribes. I will mention lost because that's how the 10 tribes have been referred to for a long time. So lost 10 tribes are coming to the fore in the consciousness of a lot of people. There are lots of ways to talk about this, but I talk about it in the sense that how this is coming to the consciousness of people. A lot of books are being written today and recently that talk about the 10 tribes. Yair's, of course, is like a number one. He isn't a class by itself because he's written so many of them. But others are writing it too. The Almighty is doing that. He is raising consciousness of people in our times, the 10 tribes, of course. Some among Yehuda, there's quite an awakening in Yehuda about the 10 tribes, and also Gentiles who have no connection whatsoever in any way to either Jews or the 10 tribes. The consciousness is being raised there as well about the latter days, which is the setting of the 10 tribes. So 3 questions we want to ask. Who are we who are hearing more and more about the lost 10 tribes? Who is the we? And what times are we talking about? Why was the information about them, the lost 10 tribes, hidden for 27 centuries? It was hidden. That's why they became the lost 10 tribes. The Bible tells us that who the we and in what times, what kind of times we are hearing more and more about the lost 10 tribes. What times are those? Why are there such particular times after some 2,700 years? The best place to start about this in the Torah, in the book of beginnings, Genesis 49, 1 and 2. I'm using the Amplified Classic Translation, which often uses some extra words to show the intent and the thrust of the Hebrew text. If you're speaking Hebrew, you'll get the thrust more, but if you don't, sometimes we've got to add a few descriptive words, which the Amplified Translation does just finely. It says, and Jacob called for his sons and said, gather yourselves together. The word is hasifu. Gather yourselves around me, right then and there, that I may tell you what shall befall you in the latter days. So his sons are gathered right around him as he's giving this prophecy of the latter days. That's the timing we want to talk about. And then it says in verse 2, gather yourselves, hikavtu, together and hear, your sons of Jacob, and hearken to Israel, your father. We need to notice that in verse 1, Jacob is referring to himself as Jacob. In verse 2, he refers himself to Israel and tells the sons, gather yourselves together and hear and hearken. And it's 2 times he tells them to listen to Israel your father when in the latter days, when you are to gather yourselves together. So that's his last command to his people. Gather yourselves together and listen to me, and make sure you listen to me. So hear and hearken what Israel your father is telling you in the latter days. So ikaptu means collect yourselves together. Okay, and veshimu has a connotation of listen carefully, obediently. So he's going to tell us something in the latter days to which we better listen, because he's speaking on the Almighty's behalf prophetically, that we better listen to that message that he is going to tell us in the latter days. In verse 1, Jacob tells us, again, I'm going to stress it's the latter days. So that's the setting we need to be listening to. Now, Genesis 49, on his deathbed, it gives the last 2 commands. And we need to stress that to the 10 tribes. That's what they need to do. They need to listen to Israel, our father, our spiritual father. It's not only our physical father as Jacob, but we need to listen to the spiritual father, Israel, because that's the spiritual name he was given. Twice our father was given that name. Now, after he says this prophecy, he gives the identifying characteristics of his sons. Because, why? Because in the latter days, by that time, they will have forgotten their identities. How could they lose them? It's like, ask yourself, if your name is Joe Smith, how could you possibly lose your name? And we need to listen to what he tells us, because what the Torah tells us, how come we lost their names? There was only one way for Israel to lose their names. So the Almighty tells us in his testimony, the historical record of his Torah, that if his chosen people, chosen to be his firstborn among the nations, that's how Israel is called in the book of Exodus, they were chosen, they were covenanted, it's a strange word, in other words, contracted for a task. The Almighty chose Israel with a particular task, and he made a covenant with them. And we, the 10 tribes, and all of Israel, Jews, and all the other tribes, all the 12 tribes of Israel swore to him that they would be carrying out this task. And part of the oath was that of consequences. If they break this oath, they will not carry out this task. They will depart from what they swore to. Then they would be cast out of the land of the covenant, and they would lose their names. So that's how come they lost their names, because they rejected purposefully and deliberately carrying out the task. And the task was to learn the Torah and live accordingly, and become teachers to all the other children of God. Only then could they speak to them. If they're not modeling it with their behavior, then they will not be allowed to speak to the other children of God, who also need the way of the Almighty, which are the Torah's commandments. So to further their identity as Israel would not be known in the world by others and by themselves, they would stay that way. So till the latter days, they were to serve out a sentence. So the Almighty sentenced them. That's in Isaiah 40. Turn to that, Isaiah 40. It says in there that, I just get hold of it. I'm turning to Isaiah 40, verse 1. It says, speak comfortably to Jerusalem and cry unto her that her warfare is accomplished and that her iniquity is pardoned. That word warfare, did some research on the warfare. It implies, of course, that the rebels who turned away from keeping the Torah and the contract that the Almighty made with them, they went to war with the Almighty about this. The Almighty calls this a war, but the war says till the warfare is accomplished. Well, that word warfare has a connotation to it that is a sentence that a prisoner of war gets. A prisoner of war is held in a camp or some prison, and many of them die, but after a while they are released. And this particular sentence, the Almighty sentenced the 10 tribes on, it's about 2,700 years. That's a pretty long stay in a prison houses that they earned for themselves as a judgment from the Almighty. At that time, when that sentence is done, at the end of days, in the latter days of this particular epoch of historical times, which is called the times of the Gentiles, when that is done, and the Almighty will step in and restore Israel and will act with great vengeance against the nations who have mistreated, Elam as being one, Persia, that is when they'll be let loose. And they will they will remember at that time who they are, the 10 tribes, and they will confess this great sin that they have done and they persisted in for 2,700 years. All right. So that is the reason why we have lost our names. When I say we, why? Why do I say? Because I identify as someone who's, the Almighty has awakened from this prison house. I have not asked the Almighty for it. It's just awakened us as it does with many others, many other 10 tribes. As a matter of fact, all of the 10 tribes returnees so far have been awakened. They have not awakened themselves because they are spoken of as being dead, spiritually dead. A dead person cannot awaken himself or herself. The Almighty has to do that. He is the one who resurrects the 10 tribes. So we can see that this punishment was very, very, very severe, because that is said in the Torah that you will lose your name if you leave this contract to which you swore, and you will forget your name. So it's like a person forgets a name, they forget their identity completely. So that is what the 10 tribes need to remember, and that is what Judah needs to remember also about the 10 tribes. As much as they want to help them, one of the greatest way they can help them is to pray for them, that they be awakened by the Almighty, because Judah cannot wake them up. It's the Almighty can wake them up, and they can be of service, of course, to the 10 tribes to help them return to the Torah. So I want to end with that statement and answer some questions about this presentation, what the book of Hosea says, what 2 Chronicles 7:14 says, which is quoted an awful lot of time by Christians who can be a great helper to the return of the 10 tribes, because they'll be coming from the 10 tribes, most of them in the West anyway. And what kind of deep repentance needs to be done by the 10 tribes in order to return to the Almighty, and just how that is going to be accomplished, because the Almighty has actually revealed the procedure and the steps. So please stay tuned for part 2 of this presentation of what these procedures are and what the nitty-gritty is that the 10 tribes need to acknowledge according to what's directed to them in the book of Hosea, which is written to the 10 tribes, virtually, mostly, about what they need to acknowledge, what they have done, what they are doing, and what they need to confess in order to return to the Almighty, and what the procedure of that is. There's a particular procedure that the Almighty has spelled out for us, and I would talk about that because this procedure is not something that we, meaning 10 tribes, or we humans, may I say that, dreamt up and came up with. It's a revelation that the Almighty has opened up our eyes to about how he's going to regather the 10 tribes his way. In other words, we're not to do it Frank Sinatra's, Frank Sinatra's way. I did it my way. The Almighty says, my people, Israel, I will regather my way in my time.